Hello and welcome to The Drowsy Architect. We tell the stories of the world's greatest buildings, slowly, gently, as bedtime stories for grown-ups. The narration is calm, the music is soft, and if you fall asleep along the way, that is exactly what we are here for. Tonight, we visit Notre-Dame de Paris, a cathedral that took 2 centuries to build and 1 evening to nearly lose. Tonight, we tell the whole story, not just the fire, but the 800 years that came before it. If you enjoy what you hear, a like or a subscribe helps us make more of these. Let us begin. There is a building in the heart of Paris that has seen everything. It has seen kings crowned and queens mourned. It has seen plagues sweep through the streets below and wars burn the city around it. It has seen revolutions topple thrones and emperors crown themselves in its nave. It has been neglected and nearly demolished. It has been loved and restored and loved again. And in April of 2019, it burned. Tonight, we are going to tell the story of Notre-Dame de Paris, not just the fire, though we will come to that, but the whole story, 860 years of it, from the first stone laid on a muddy island in the Seine to the scaffolding that rises above it now, as it is rebuilt once more. This is the story of a cathedral that is inseparable from the city that built it, the city that neglected it, the city that wept when it burned, and the city that is building it again. Notre Dame is not the largest cathedral in the world. It is not the tallest. It is not the most ornate, but it may be the most loved. Something about this building, its position on that island in the river, its silhouette against the Paris sky, the grey stone and the grey water and the grey light that binds them together. Something about Notre Dame has made it more than a church. It has become a symbol of Paris, of France, of something older and harder to name, the persistence of stone, the stubbornness of beauty, the refusal of certain buildings to disappear. So settle in, let the day fall away. The Seine is dark tonight, the city is quiet, and the oldest building in Paris is waiting for us. Our story begins on an island. The Isle de la Cite sits in the middle of the Seine like a stone boat anchored in the current. It is small, barely 1,000 meters long and 300 meters wide, but it is the oldest part of Paris, the place where the city was born. The Parisii, a Celtic tribe, settled here in the 3rd century before Christ. The Romans came in 52 BC and built a town they called Lutetia. The island was a natural fortress, surrounded by the river on all sides, easy to defend, impossible to ignore. The Seine flows around it in 2 arms, the left bank to the south and the right bank to the north, and the island sits between them like the stone in a ring. By the time our story begins, in the 12th century, the island is already ancient. Layers of history lie beneath its streets, Roman foundations, Merovingian tombs, the remnants of earlier churches, smaller, darker, built and rebuilt over centuries as the city grew around them. The island in the 12th century is the administrative and spiritual heart of Paris. The royal palace stands at its western tip, a fortress of stone towers and thick walls where the king holds court. The Cathedral of St. Stephen occupies the eastern end. Between them, a dense labyrinth of narrow streets and tightly packed houses fills every available space. The streets are muddy. The houses lean against each other for support. Pigs and chickens wander between the buildings. The smell, on a warm day, is considerable. This is not the elegant Paris of the boulevards. This is a medieval city, cramped and noisy and alive with commerce and faith, and the the constant low hum of 10,000 people living very close together. The island is connected to both banks of the river by bridges. These are not the open stone bridges we know today. They are built-up structures, lined on both sides with houses and shops, so that crossing the river feels less like crossing a bridge and more like walking through a particularly narrow and precarious street. The bridges sway slightly underfoot. Through gaps between the buildings, you catch glimpses of the river below, gray-green and swift, carrying boats and barges, and occasionally less pleasant cargo downstream toward the sea. There has been a church on this spot for a very long time, perhaps since the 4th century, certainly since the 6th, when a cathedral dedicated to Saint Stephen stood here. By the 12th century, this old cathedral has become too small, too cramped, too dark. The city of Paris has grown enormously, swelling outward from the island along both banks of the river. It is one of the largest cities in Europe, the seat of a powerful king, the home of the greatest university in Christendom. And its cathedral is embarrassing. Other cities have built grand new churches in the revolutionary Gothic style. The Abbey of Saint Denis, just north of Paris, has pointed arches and vast windows that flood the interior with light. Chartres is building. Sens has already completed its cathedral. Lyon is rising on its hilltop. The Gothic Revolution is sweeping through northern France like a wave, and Paris, the capital, the greatest city in the kingdom, is being left behind. This will not do. The man who decides to change this is Maurice de Sully. He is an extraordinary figure, born into poverty, the son of a peasant family. He rises through the church by sheer force of intellect and will. He becomes Bishop of Paris in 1160, and almost immediately, he announces his great project. Paris will have a new cathedral. It will be the largest in France. It will be the most beautiful. It will stand on the Isle de la Cite, on the site of the old Cathedral of Saint Stephen. And it will be built in the new Gothic style that is transforming the architecture of the age. Maurice de Sully is not an architect. He is an administrator, a visionary, a fundraiser of extraordinary ability. He persuades King Louis VII to contribute funds from the royal treasury. He collects donations from the nobility, from the guilds, from ordinary Parisians who give what they can. He organizes the demolition of the old cathedral and the houses that crowd around it. He clears the site. He lays the groundwork, not just physically but politically and financially, for a building that will take nearly 2 centuries to complete. The first stone is laid in 1163. Some accounts say that Pope Alexander III himself was present, consecrating the foundation during a visit to Paris. Whether or not this is true, the occasion is solemn. A new cathedral is being born. The greatest building project that Paris has ever undertaken is beginning. Maurice de Sully will spend the rest of his life on this project. He will die in 1196, 33 years after construction began. By then, the choir and the apse are largely complete. The eastern end of the cathedral, the end closest to the rising sun, stands in the Paris sky, but the nave is still under construction. The western facade, the famous facade with its 2 great towers, has not even been started. Maurice will not see it, but that is the nature of cathedral building. You begin what you cannot finish. You lay foundations for walls that your grandchildren will raise. You plant seeds for a forest of stone that will take 100 years to grow. The building site is enormous. It occupies most of the eastern end of the island. Hundreds of men work here, stonemasons and carpenters and labourers and blacksmiths. The sound of hammers on stone echoes across the river. Dust rises in pale clouds that drift over the Seine and settle on the boats below. The stone comes from quarries south of Paris, limestone from the Isle de France, a pale honey-colored stone that turns gray over time as it absorbs the rain and the smoke and the breath of the city. The blocks are brought to the island by barge, floated down the Seine, and unloaded at the water's edge. Ox carts haul them up the short slope to the building site. Each block is numbered and marked by the mason who carved it. These masons' marks survive on some of the stones to this day. Small symbols carved into the faces that would be hidden once the block was placed in the wall. A cross, a star, an arrow, a zigzag. Each mark identifies the mason who shaped the block so that he could be paid for his work. The craftsmen are organized into guilds: the stonemasons, the carpenters, the glassmakers, the iron workers. Each guild has its own hierarchy, from apprentice to journeyman to master. Each guild guards its techniques jealously: the knowledge of how to cut a voussoir for a pointed arch, how to shape a capital with carved foliage, how to lead a panel of stained glass. This knowledge is passed from master to apprentice in a chain that stretches back generations and forward into the centuries to come. The master builder oversees everything. He is the architect. Though the word architect is not yet in common use, he is called the maître d'œuvre, the master of the work. His name, for the earliest phase of Notre-Dame's construction, is not known with certainty. Some scholars believe it was a man named Pierre de Montreuil, though this is debated. What is certain is that whoever he was a genius. The proportions of the choir of Notre-Dame, the soaring height, the balance of light and stone, the elegance of the structural system. These are the work of a mind of extraordinary subtlety and confidence. To understand what is being built, you need to understand the Gothic Revolution. Before Gothic, churches were Romanesque, heavy, dark. Their walls were thick because they had to be. The entire weight of the stone roof pressed downward and outward through the walls. If the walls were not thick enough, they collapsed. And thick walls meant small windows, and small windows meant darkness. The Romanesque church is a fortress of God. You enter it and the world disappears. The light is dim, the air is cool and damp. The stone presses in around you. It is powerful, it is solemn, but it is heavy. And by the 12th century, architects are dreaming of something different. The Gothic Revolution is built on three inventions, three structural innovations that, together, transform the dark, heavy Romanesque church into something that seems to defy gravity. The first is the pointed arch. A round arch pushes outward as well as downward. The wider the span, the greater the outward thrust. A pointed arch concentrates the forces more vertically. It pushes down more and out less. This means walls can be thinner, spans can be wider, the building can breathe. The second is the ribbed vault. Instead of a solid ceiling of stone, the Gothic builders create a skeleton of stone ribs that arc across the ceiling in a web of intersecting arches. The spaces between the ribs are filled with thin stone panels. The result is a ceiling that is lighter than a solid vault, but just as strong. The weight is concentrated along the ribs, flowing down to specific points on the walls below, rather than pressing uniformly along the entire length of the wall. The third and most dramatic is the flying buttress. This is the invention that makes everything else possible. The outward thrust of the vaulted ceiling, the push that would topple an unsupported wall, is caught by great stone arms that reach out from the exterior of the building and channel the force down to massive piers standing outside the wall. The flying buttress is a crutch, an external skeleton. It holds the building up from outside. freeing the walls inside to be thin, to be pierced with enormous windows, to become screens of colored glass rather than barriers of solid stone. The result is a building that seems to be made of light. The walls dissolve into glass, the ceiling soars, the stone ribs arc overhead like the branches of trees. The interior is flooded with color from windows that stretch from floor to ceiling. It is the opposite of the Romanesque fortress. It is open, luminous, vertical. It reaches for heaven, and it almost seems to get there. The effect on people who enter a Gothic cathedral for the first time is well documented. They stop, they look up, they fall silent. The vertical pull of the space, the way the pointed arches and the stone ribs draw the eye upward, creates a physical sensation of lift. You feel lighter, you feel elevated. The Gothic builders understood this. They were not merely constructing buildings, they were constructing experiences. The experience of entering the house of God. The experience of leaving the earthly world behind and stepping, for a few moments, into a space that suggests the possibility of something higher. This is what Maurice de Sully wants for Paris, not just a bigger church, not just a more modern church. He wants a church that makes you feel something, a church that lifts you out of the mud and the noise and the smell of the medieval city and places you, however briefly, in the presence of the divine. Notre-Dame is one of the earliest and most ambitious expressions of this revolution, not the first Gothic cathedral. That honor belongs to Sens or Saint Denis, depending on how you measure. But Notre-Dame pushes the technology further than any building before it. Higher walls, wider spans, larger windows, more ambitious engineering. It is the building that proves to all of Europe that the Gothic style can work at a truly monumental scale. There is something else to understand about the Gothic cathedral, something that goes beyond engineering, something that has to do with light. The Abbot Hugo of Saint Denis, the man often credited with inventing the Gothic style, writes about light in almost mystical terms. He believes that physical light is a manifestation of divine light, that to fill a church with light is to fill it with the presence of God. The great windows of the Gothic cathedral are not merely practical, they are theological. Each panel of stained glass is a window not just into the church, but into heaven itself. The light that pours through the colored glass is transformed. It is no longer ordinary sunlight. It is sacred light. It has passed through images of saints and prophets and the story of salvation, and it carries those images into the church, painting them on the floor and the walls and the faces of the faithful in colors that seem to come from another world. This is what the builders of Notre-Dame are reaching for, not just height, not just space, but light, divine light, light that enters a stone building and transforms it into something more than stone. Construction proceeds from east to west. This is standard practice for medieval cathedrals. You build the choir first, the sacred eastern end where the clergy performs the daily offices. Then you work westward through the transept, through the nave, until you reach the western facade. This means the building can be used for worship even while the western end is still under construction. Services begin in the choir, while stonemasons are still laying the foundations of the nave 100 meters to the west. The choir of Notre-Dame is completed by about 1182. It is consecrated for use. The high altar is installed. The clergy begin their daily round of prayers and chanting in a space that is, even unfinished, unlike anything Paris has seen before. The ceiling soars 33 meters above the floor. That is roughly the height of a 10-story building. For people accustomed to the low, heavy ceilings of Romanesque churches, the effect must have been staggering. Standing in the choir of Notre-Dame for the first time, looking up at that impossibly high vault, hearing your own voice echo and multiply in that vast stone space, must have felt like stepping into another world, a vertical world, a world where everything reaches upward. The windows are enormous, far larger than anything in the old cathedral. Light pours through them, colored by the stained glass, painting the stone floor with patterns of red and blue and gold that shift and move as the sun crosses the sky. After centuries of dim Romanesque gloom, the light alone must have seemed like a miracle. The nave takes another 2 decades. It is completed around 1200, just as the new century begins, and it extends the astonishing height and light of the choir across the full length of the building. The nave of Notre-Dame is 127 meters long. It consists of 10 bays, 10 great arch sections, each one identical in structure but subtly different in detail. The ribbed vaults overhead form a continuous web of stone that draws the eye forward, toward the altar and upward toward the sky. Along both sides, the aisles run parallel to the nave. They are lower, darker, flanked by the massive piers that support the upper walls. Between the piers, chapels open off the aisles like small rooms off a corridor. Each chapel will eventually be dedicated to a particular saint, decorated with altarpieces and statues and painted walls. But in these early years, many are still bare stone. The building is being used even as it grows. Worshippers and builders share the space. The sound of chanting and the sound of hammering echo through the same stone corridors. Above the aisles, a second level of arched openings, the gallery looks down into the nave from a height of about 15 meters. This gallery runs the full length of the building. It provides additional space for worshippers during the great feasts, when the cathedral is packed with thousands of people. And above the gallery, the clerestory windows march along the top of the wall, flooding the upper reaches of the nave with light. 3 levels, arcade, gallery, clerestory. This vertical composition, repeated in every bay, creates a rhythm that is both powerful and calming. Your eye follows it forward and upward simultaneously. The building is in motion, it is ascending, and it carries you with it. And the building is not just seen, it is heard. The acoustics of Notre-Dame are legendary. The stone surfaces reflect sound with almost perfect efficiency. A single voice, a priest chanting at the altar, is amplified and multiplied by the stone until it fills the entire nave. The words arrive at your ears not once but many times, each reflection slightly delayed, slightly softened, so that the voice seems to come from everywhere at once. It is as if the building itself is speaking. When the great organ plays, the effect is overwhelming. The deepest pipes produce sounds so low that you feel them in your chest rather than hearing them with your ears. The stone floor vibrates beneath your feet. The air trembles. The entire building becomes a resonating chamber, a vast instrument of stone and air and sound. The organ of Notre-Dame is one of the largest in France. When it plays at full volume during the great feasts, the sound is not heard, it is experienced. It passes through your body like a wave. And when the organ falls silent, the silence that follows is not ordinary silence. It is the silence of a space that knows how to hold sound. The reverberations die away slowly over 3 or 4 seconds, fading into a whisper, into a ghost, into nothing, and the nothing itself seems charged, expectant, as if the stone is waiting for the next note. The western facade is begun around 1200 and completed over the following decades. It is the face that Notre-Dame shows to the world, the image that appears on postcards and paintings and the covers of 1,000 books. Two great towers, flat-topped rather than spired, rising 70 meters above the ground. Between them, the great rose window. Below it, three vast portals carved with scenes of the Last Judgment, the life of the Virgin, the lives of the saints. The facade is a masterpiece of composition. Despite being built over several decades by different teams of masons, it achieves an extraordinary unity. The proportions are perfect. The vertical thrust of the towers balances the horizontal lines of the galleries. The three portals echo the three levels of the interior. Everything is in harmony. Everything speaks to everything else. The portals deserve special attention. They are among the greatest works of medieval sculpture in existence. The right portal, the portal of Saint Anne, is actually the oldest. Some of its sculpture was carved for an earlier version of the facade and then incorporated into the new design. The figures are stiff and formal in the older Romanesque style. Christ sits in majesty. Angels attend him. The composition is hieratic, solemn, ancient. The left portal, the portal of the Virgin, tells the story of Mary, her death, her assumption into heaven, her coronation by Christ. The sculpture here is more naturalistic than the portal of Saint Anne. The figures have weight and expression. Their drapery falls in realistic folds. You can see the Gothic style maturing, becoming more confident, more interested in the human body as it actually looks. The central portal, the portal of the Last Judgment, is the largest and most dramatic. Christ sits at the top, showing the wounds of his crucifixion. Below him, the Archangel Michael weighs the souls of the dead on a great balance. To the left, the saved ascend to heaven with expressions of quiet joy. To the right, the damned are dragged to hell by demons whose inventive cruelty suggests that the sculptors rather enjoyed this part of their work. The figures are carved with extraordinary skill. The drapery falls in deep folds that catch the light and cast shadows that change with the angle of the sun. The faces, though worn by centuries of weather, retain expressions of remarkable subtlety. An angel smiles with a gentleness that is almost human. A demon leers with a malice that is almost comic. A mother holds a child with a tenderness that transcends the stone. These portals are not just decoration, they are theology in stone. They tell the people of Paris, most of whom cannot read, the essential stories of their faith. The facade of Notre-Dame is a book, written in stone for a city of the illiterate. You do not need to enter the church to receive its message. You only need to stand before it and look. The portals were originally painted. This is a fact that surprises many people. We are accustomed to seeing medieval stone as bare gray limestone, but the medieval builders painted everything. The carved figures were bright with color, robes of blue and red and gold, faces of pink and cream, crowns and halos gilded with real gold leaf. The portals of Notre-Dame, when they were new, would have blazed with color against the pale stone of the facade. Time and weather have worn the paint away. What we see now is the skeleton of the original design. Beautiful, but not what the builders intended. Above the portals, a row of 28 statues stands in a long horizontal gallery. These are the kings of Judah, the Old Testament ancestors of Christ. They are tall, severe, watching the city from their stone perches with blank, sightless eyes. These statues have a story of their own. During the French Revolution in 1793, the revolutionary mob mistakes them for the kings of France. Statues of kings have no place in a republic. The mob tears them down. Ropes are thrown around their necks. They are pulled from the facade and fall crashing to the pavement below. Their heads are struck off. Their bodies are carted away and buried. For nearly 2 centuries, they are lost. And then, in 1977, during construction work on a building on the Rue de la Chaussée-d'Antin, workmen discover 21 of the original heads. They are buried in a neat row, face down, carefully arranged by whoever buried them. Someone, during the Revolution, had gathered the severed heads and hidden them, protected them, preserved them for a future that might want them back. The heads are now in the Musée de Cluny. The statues on the facade today are 19th century replacements, carved during the Great Restoration by Viollet-le-Duc. But the original heads survive, battered, weathered, some with their noses broken and their features softened by centuries underground. They look out from their museum cases with the same blank stare they once directed at the city from the heights of Notre-Dame. The great rose windows are completed in the 13th century. There are 3 of them, one on the western facade, one on the northern transept, one on the southern transept. They are among the largest and most magnificent stained glass windows in the world. The western rose, above the central portal, is about 10 meters in diameter. It dates from around 1225. Its design is intricate, radiating outward from a central image of the Virgin and Child in concentric rings of prophets and virtues and saints. The glass is predominantly blue and red, the colors that medieval glassmakers produced most brilliantly. But it is the transept roses that truly astonish. The northern rose, installed around 1250, is 13 meters in diameter. It depicts the Virgin surrounded by figures of the Old Testament, 80 panels of glass arranged in concentric circles, each one a jewel of color and line. The blue is extraordinary, a deep, intense, luminous blue that seems to glow with its own light rather than merely transmitting the light behind it. Medieval blue glass contains cobalt. And there is something about the way this cobalt interacts with northern light, with the gray sky of Paris, that produces a color of almost supernatural beauty. The southern rose, of similar size, faces the afternoon sun. Its subject is Christ in majesty, surrounded by apostles and saints. The glass here is warmer, reds and golds that blaze when the afternoon sun strikes them. If you stand in the southern transept at about 3 o'clock on a sunny afternoon, the light through this window is overwhelming. It fills the transept with color. The stone floor becomes a carpet of red and gold. The piers glow. The air itself seems tinted. You are standing inside a ruby. These windows have survived 800 years. They have survived revolutions and wars and neglect, and the vibrations of modern traffic and the slow chemical attack of pollution on medieval glass. Some panels have been replaced, some have been restored, but the essence, the deep blue and the blazing red and the extraordinary quality of light, is original. You are looking at the same colors that the people of the 13th century saw. The same light that fell on the stone 800 years ago falls on it still. Notre-Dame was not built all at once. It grew, it changed, it accumulated. Over the course of the 13th and 14th centuries, the building is modified and extended. The original design called for relatively small windows in the nave, but as the Gothic style evolves and builders grow more confident, larger windows are wanted. Flying buttresses are added and enlarged. Their spans increase to allow the upper walls to be thinner and the clerestory windows to be bigger. The building becomes lighter, more transparent, more glass and less stone. Chapels are added between the buttresses along the nave. These had not been part of the original design, but wealthy families and guilds want their own chapels, their own altars, their own private spaces within the cathedral. And so the spaces between the flying buttresses are enclosed and roofed, creating a ring of small chapels around the exterior of the building. Each one is funded by a different patron. Each one is decorated according to the patron's taste and budget. The cathedral grows outward as well as upward. The transept is extended in the 1250s, pushing the northern and southern arms further out and creating the great facades that hold the rose windows. The architect Jean de Chelles begins this work. His successor Pierre de Montreuil completes it. Their names survive because they are carved into the building itself, a rare thing in an age when most architects remain anonymous. They are proud of what they have done, and they have reason to be. By 1345, nearly 2 centuries after construction began, Notre-Dame is essentially complete. It is the largest cathedral in Paris, one of the largest in France, a building of extraordinary ambition and beauty that has taken 6 generations of builders, from Maurice de Sully's first stone to the final finials on the flying buttresses, to bring into existence. Think about what this means. When the last stone was placed, no one alive had been born when the first stone was laid. The builders of 1345 were separated from the builders of 1163 by nearly 200 years. They spoke a different version of French. They wore different clothes. They lived under different kings. The world had changed enormously in the intervening centuries. The Crusades had come and gone. The Mongols had swept across Asia. Marco Polo had visited China. The compass had been invented. Spectacles had been invented. The university had been founded. Dante had written the Divine Comedy. And yet the building is coherent. It makes sense. The western facade does not look as though it was designed by different people from the choir. The proportions hold. The vocabulary of pointed arches and ribbed vaults and flying buttresses is consistent from east to west. This is the miracle of the medieval building tradition, not the engineering, remarkable as that is, but the continuity, the ability of one generation to hand its knowledge and its vision to the next, and the next, and the next, across nearly 2 centuries, without losing the thread. It will stand, essentially unchanged, for the next 400 years. And now, let us walk through it. Approach from the west, cross the Pont au Double from the left bank, or walk down from the Chatelet on the right bank, and come to the Parvis, the great open square before the western facade. The square is modern. In the Middle Ages, the approach to Notre-Dame was very different. A tangle of narrow streets and leaning houses crowded close to the cathedral on every side. You would come upon it suddenly, turning a corner and finding the facade looming above you, impossibly large, impossibly close. The medieval experience of Notre-Dame was one of compression and release. You moved through the dark, cramped streets, and then suddenly the cathedral exploded into view. The shock of scale, the overwhelm of stone and glass and carved figures rising above the rooftops. Today, the Parvis is open. The buildings have been cleared away. You can stand at a distance and take in the whole facade at once. The 2 towers, the rose window, the 3 portals, the gallery of kings, it is handsome, it is dignified, but something of the medieval drama has been lost. The cathedral was designed to overwhelm, to appear suddenly, to be too much. The open square makes it manageable, comprehensible, and Notre-Dame was never meant to be comprehensible. Stand before the central portal, look up. Christ sits in judgment above you. The blessed and the damned stretch out on either side. Hundreds of carved figures crowd the archivolts, the concentric arches that frame the doorway. Each one is a tiny masterpiece. A bishop holding a crozier, a demon gnawing on a sinner, an angel with folded wings. The level of detail is remarkable, especially when you remember that most of this sculpture was carved in situ by men standing on scaffolding, working with hammer and chisel at a height of 20 meters. Step through the portal, cross the threshold, and enter the nave. The transition from outside to inside is abrupt, more abrupt than almost any other building you will ever enter. One moment, you are standing in the Paris sunlight, surrounded by tourists and traffic and the noise of the city. The next, you are inside a stone cave that is 860 years old. The noise falls away, the light changes, the temperature drops. The world outside ceases to exist. You are somewhere else now, somewhere older, somewhere deeper, somewhere that operates by different rules. The first thing you feel is the height. The ceiling is 33 meters above you. Your eye is pulled upward by the vertical lines of the piers, the pointed arches, the ribbed vaults arcing overhead. After the horizontal world of the street, the nave is a vertical revelation. Everything ascends, everything lifts. The second thing you feel is the cool. Medieval cathedrals are natural air conditioners. The thick stone walls absorb heat slowly and release it slowly. In summer, the interior is 10 degrees cooler than the street. In winter, the stone holds a residual warmth that takes the edge off the cold. The air inside Notre-Dame has a particular quality, slightly damp, faintly sweet. The smell of old stone and candle wax, and something that might be centuries of incense absorbed into the pores of the limestone. Walk forward slowly. The nave stretches before you, bay after bay, the ribbed vaults repeating overhead like the segments of a great stone caterpillar. On either side, the piers rise in clusters of stone columns, bunched together like the trunks of enormous trees. They have no capitals in the classical sense. Instead, they flow directly into the arches above, creating an unbroken vertical line from floor to ceiling that pulls your eye irresistibly upward. The floor beneath your feet is worn smooth by 8 centuries of footsteps, millions of feet, pilgrims and penitents, kings and commoners, tourists and worshippers. The stone has been polished by the passing of humanity until it gleams dully in the filtered light. In places, the wear is visible, slight hollows where generations of feet have followed the same path. A shallow groove at the threshold of a side chapel where people have paused and turned. The stone remembers the footsteps even when the feet are long gone. Along the sides of the nave, the chapels open off the aisles like alcoves in a library. Each one is a small world of its own. Some are lit with banks of votive candles, their flames trembling in the faintest current of air. The candlelight catches the gilded frames of paintings and the polished surfaces of marble altars. Each chapel has its own atmosphere, its own particular quality of silence. Some feel intimate and warm, enclosed by their arched ceilings and lined with devotional paintings. Others feel austere, bare stone and a simple crucifix and nothing else. You could spend hours visiting each one, reading the inscriptions, studying the paintings, tracing the names of the families who funded them centuries ago. And the light is extraordinary. It enters through the clerestory windows high above, and through the rose windows at either end of the transept, and through the smaller windows in the chapels along the sides. It is never direct, never harsh. The thick walls filter it, the glass colors it. By the time it reaches the floor, it has been transformed into something soft and diffuse and faintly tinted. The interior of Notre-Dame does not blaze with light the way later Gothic cathedrals do. Chartres is brighter. Sainte-Chapelle is a jewel box of pure color. Notre-Dame is subtler. The light here is gray and gentle, with pools of color where the sun strikes a window at the right angle. It is Paris light, the soft gray luminous light of the Isle de France, captured in stone and glass. Walk to the crossing, the point where the nave meets the transept. Here the space opens outward, left and right, and upward. The transept arms stretch north and south. Above you, the crossing is crowned by a vault that seems impossibly high. A web of stone ribs converging at a central keystone that is barely visible in the shadows above. Turn and look north. The rose window fills the end wall of the transept. From inside, it is transformed. From outside, a rose window is a disc of gray stone tracery. From inside, it is an explosion of color, the blue, that medieval blue. It blazes above you like a circular window into heaven. The figures of prophets and saints are small, almost invisible from the floor. But the color, the blue, you do not need to read the iconography. You only need to stand beneath it and let the color wash over you. Turn south, the southern rose, warmer, redder. If you are here in the afternoon, the sun pours through it and the transept fills with gold and red. The two roses face each other across the crossing like two eyes of different colors, one blue, one gold, each seeing something different in the light. Stand still for a moment. In the crossing, close your eyes, listen. The building has sounds of its own, the distant murmur of other visitors, their footsteps softened by the vastness of the space into a gentle shuffle, an occasional cough, amplified and diffused by the stone until it seems to come from the ceiling itself. And beneath everything, a silence so deep it has texture. You can feel it pressing against your ears. It is the silence of a space that has held sound for 800 years. And in the absence of sound, holds the memory of it. Open your eyes, continue east, toward the altar, toward the apse. The ceiling lowers slightly here, the space narrows, the piers crowd closer together. You are moving from the public space of the nave into the sacred space of the choir. The transition is subtle but unmistakable. The building is gathering you in, drawing you closer, like a whisper that makes you lean forward to hear. The choir stalls, carved in dark oak, line both sides. They date from the 18th century, replacements for medieval stalls that had deteriorated. The carving is fine, panels depicting scenes from the life of Christ. Armrests shaped like lions and griffins and foliate heads that seem to emerge from the wood as if growing from it. Misericords, the small ledges beneath the tip-up seats that allowed clergy to rest during long services while appearing to stand, are carved with scenes that range from the pious to the profane. A fox preaching to chickens, a man pulling a thorn from his foot, a woman beating her husband with a ladle. The medieval carvers, even in the 18th century replacements that echo their tradition, allowed themselves moments of humor in the most sacred of spaces. In the candlelight, the dark wood glows with a warmth that contrasts with the cool gray stone around it. Behind the altar, the apse curves in a great semicircle. The ribbed vault fans outward like the spokes of a wheel, and all around the apse, the ambulatory winds in a gentle arc, with chapels opening off it like petals off a flower. This is the oldest part of the cathedral, the part that Maurice de Sully lived to see. 860 years of prayer have soaked into these stones. You cannot see it, but you can feel it, a weight, a presence, the accumulated devotion of millions of people who have stood where you are standing, looked where you are looking, and felt something that words cannot quite reach. Let us step outside now, walk around the building, see it from all sides. From the south, the The flying buttresses are magnificent. They reach out from the upper walls in great stone arcs, leaping across space to land on massive piers that stand like sentinels around the exterior. Each buttress is topped with a pinnacle, a pointed stone spike that adds weight and directs the forces downward. The buttresses of Notre-Dame are among the most graceful in Gothic architecture. They are not mere structural necessities. They are beautiful, arching through space with the elegance of bridges. Or the ribs of some enormous stone creature sprawled along the south bank of the Seine. Between the buttresses, the chapels bulge outward from the nave like blisters on the skin of the building. Their roofs are steep and laid covered. Their windows are smaller than the great clear story above. Each one is a miniature building within the greater building, a church within a church. Walk to the tip of the island, behind the apse. A small park occupies the eastern end of the Isle de la Cite. The square Jean XXIII. Here, weeping willows trail their branches toward the water. Benches face the river. It is one of the quietest places in the center of Paris. You can sit here with the cathedral at your back and watch the Seine flow eastward toward the suburbs and the countryside beyond. The river is always moving, always changing. Green in spring when the rain has washed the fields upstream. Brown in autumn when the leaves have fallen and the current carries them in slow spirals. Steel gray in winter under the low Paris sky. The river has been flowing past this spot for millennia. It flowed past when the Romans built their temple on the island. It flowed past when Maurice de Sully laid his first stone. It flows past now. The cathedral and the river exist in a conversation that has lasted 860 years. And in that conversation, the river does all the talking. Turn around from the east, the view is perhaps the most beautiful of all. The apse of Notre-Dame rises above the Seine in a cascade of stone and glass. The flying buttresses radiate outward like the legs of a great stone spider, supporting the high walls of the choir with effortless grace. The windows of the apse curve upward in a half-circle of light, and above everything, until 2019, rose the spire. The spire was not original. It was added in the 19th century by the architect Eugene Viollet-le-Duc as part of his great restoration. It was a slender timber structure clad in laid, rising 93 meters above the ground, topped by a rooster-shaped weather vane that contained 3 relics: a fragment of the crown of thorns, a relic of Saint Denis, and a relic of Saint Genevieve, placed there to protect the cathedral from lightning. The spire was visible from all over Paris, from the Latin Quarter to the south, from the Marais to the east, from the hill of Montmartre to the north. It had become, over the century and a half since Viollet-le-Duc erected it, one of the defining elements of the Paris skyline. People who lived in Paris measured their relationship to the city partly by their view of the spire. It was a compass point, a fixed reference in a changing city. And on the 15th of April 2019, it fell. But we are getting ahead of ourselves. Before the fire, there is much more to tell. The cathedral is finished, but a cathedral is never really finished. It is used, it is modified, it is decorated and redecorated. It absorbs the events of history like a sponge absorbs water. Let us move through the centuries. In 1239, King Louis IX, Saint Louis, brings to Paris the crown of thorns, the relic believed to be the one placed on Christ's head during the crucifixion. He has purchased it from the Byzantine emperor at enormous expense. He builds the Sainte-Chapelle to house it, that jewel box of glass and gold just a few hundred meters from Notre-Dame. But before the Sainte-Chapelle is complete, the crown of thorns is kept in Notre-Dame. The cathedral becomes, for a time, the guardian of the most sacred relic in Christendom. In 1431, the young English King Henry VI is crowned King of France in Notre-Dame. It is the middle of the 100 Years' War. English forces control Paris. Joan of Arc has already been burned at Rouen. The coronation is a political act, an assertion of English authority over France. It does not last. Within 20 years, the English are driven out, but the ceremony has happened in Notre-Dame. Because even an occupying power needs the legitimacy that this cathedral confers. In 1455, a remarkable trial takes place in Notre-Dame. Joan of Arc, burned at the stake in Rouen in 1431, is posthumously retried. The original verdict of heresy is overturned. She is declared innocent. The Maid of Orleans, who had helped to save France from English occupation, is rehabilitated in the cathedral that had witnessed her enemy's coronation just 24 years earlier. The building has a long memory, and it sees justice done, even if it takes a quarter of a century. In 1572, the cathedral plays a role in one of the darkest chapters of French history. On the 18th of August, the Protestant princess Marguerite de Valois is married to the Catholic Henry of Navarre at the door of Notre-Dame. It is supposed to be a wedding of reconciliation, uniting the Catholic and Protestant factions. 6 days later, on St. Bartholomew's Day, the Catholics massacre thousands of Protestants in Paris and across France. The marriage that was celebrated at Notre-Dame becomes the prelude to mass murder. Through all of these centuries, Notre-Dame is not merely a stage for great events. It is the daily church of ordinary Parisians. Every day, the clergy gather in the choir for the liturgical offices. Matins before dawn, lauds at sunrise, prime, terce, sext, none, vespers at sunset, compline before bed. The cycle of prayer rolls on through the hours like the turning of a wheel. The chanting of the monks and the canons echoes through the stone vaults. A continuous murmur that is the background music of the island. If you live near the cathedral, you hear it through the walls of your house, through the narrow streets, the sound of prayer woven into the fabric of the day. Ordinary people come and go. They slip into the side aisles for a moment of quiet prayer on their way to market. They light candles for the sick. They bring their children to be baptized. They come to be married. They come to mourn. The cathedral is not a museum. It is a living church, the center of a community, the place where the great events of ordinary lives, birth and marriage and death, are marked and sanctified and given meaning. The seasons turn at Christmas. The nave is lit with hundreds of candles. The choir sings carols that have been sung here for centuries. The stone, which in January is so cold that your breath rises in pale clouds, seems almost warm in the candlelight. At Easter, the great Paschal candle is lit in the darkness of the nave, a single flame in the blackness, and from that flame, hundreds of smaller flames are kindled until the entire cathedral blazes with light, the resurrection. Enacted in fire every year for 800 years. In 1804, Napoleon Bonaparte crowns himself Emperor of the French in Notre-Dame. It is a carefully stage-managed event. The artist Jacques-Louis David paints the scene in a monumental canvas that now hangs in the Louvre. Napoleon takes the crown from Pope Pius VII's hands and places it on his own head. The message is clear. He owes his power to no one, not even God. The cathedral, which has witnessed coronations before, has never seen anything quite like this. But the century that treats Notre-Dame worst is the 18th. The Enlightenment has little patience for medieval architecture. The Gothic style is considered barbarous, ugly. The word Gothic itself is an insult. implying the rude artistry of the Goths who sacked Rome. Educated Parisians look at Notre-Dame and see not beauty but backwardness, not grace but gloom. And so they begin to improve it. The clerics want more light. They find the medieval interior too dark, too gloomy. They are men of the Enlightenment, men of reason and clarity, and they see no beauty in colored shadow. In the 1720s, the medieval stained glass in the nave is removed. It is replaced with plain white glass. The reasoning is that the cathedral is too dark, more light is needed. The colored glass, those panels of deep blue and ruby red that had filtered the light for 500 years, is taken out and destroyed. Plain glass is installed. The nave becomes brighter, and it loses something that can never be recovered. The choir is remodeled in the 1720s and 1730s. Medieval choir stalls are ripped out and replaced with Baroque furniture. Medieval screens are demolished. A new marble floor is laid. The medieval altar is removed and replaced with a more fashionable design. The changes are well-intentioned. The clergy want a modern cathedral, a cathedral of light and reason. But the result is a building that has lost much of its medieval character. And then comes the Revolution. In 1789, the Revolution begins. By 1793, it has become a war against the church. Across France, churches are sacked, altars are smashed, bells are melted down for cannon, statues of saints are pulled from their niches and broken. Notre-Dame is not spared. The Gallery of Kings is attacked. The 28 statues, mistaken for the kings of France, are pulled down and decapitated. The treasury is looted. The bells are removed. The lead from the roof is stripped and melted for ammunition. Every piece of precious metal, every silver candlestick, every golden vessel is confiscated. The cathedral is rededicated as a temple of reason. A ceremony is held on the 10th of November, 1793, in which a young actress, dressed as the goddess of reason, is enthroned on the high altar. Hymns to liberty are sung where chants to God had echoed for 6 centuries. It is, depending on your perspective, either a triumph of Enlightenment ideals or a grotesque sacrilege, perhaps both. Later, the building is briefly renamed the Temple of the Supreme Being, as Robespierre tries to replace both Christianity and atheism with his own peculiar theology. The name changes come and go. The building endures them all with the indifference of stone. The cathedral survives, barely. Its windows are broken, its statues are smashed, its treasury is empty, its bells are silent. It is used as a warehouse, a wine store, a stable. The greatest cathedral in Paris has become a barn. And this is where Victor Hugo enters the story. In 1831, Hugo publishes a novel. Its French title is Notre-Dame de Paris. The English-speaking world knows it as The Hunchback of Notre Dame. It is a love story, a tragedy, a melodrama of extraordinary power, but more than anything, it is a love letter to a building. Hugo does not merely set his story in Notre Dame. He makes the cathedral a character, the most important character. Quasimodo, the deaf hunchback bell ringer, is the building's soul. Esmeralda, the beautiful Romany dancer, is the beauty that the city threatens to destroy. And Claude Frollo, the tormented archdeacon, is the corruption that festers within the church itself. But the true subject of the novel is architecture. Hugo uses the story to make an argument, a passionate, furious, eloquent argument that the medieval buildings of France are being destroyed by ignorance and neglect. He describes Notre-Dame in loving detail, and then he describes the damage that has been done to it, the missing statues, the broken windows, the mutilated portals, the whitewash that covers the medieval paint. He writes with anger and with grief. And he reaches an enormous audience. The novel is a sensation. All of France reads it. Hugo's description of the cathedral, its towers and its portals and its flying buttresses, is so vivid and so passionate that readers who have walked past Notre-Dame 1,000 times without looking up suddenly see it. They see the carved stone and the soaring arches and the rose windows that they had always taken for granted. Hugo makes them see that is his gift, not just as a storyteller, but as an advocate for beauty. There is a famous passage in the novel, often overlooked in favor of the love story, in which Hugo describes how the printed book will kill the stone book, how the invention of the printing press has made the great architectural texts of the Middle Ages obsolete. This will kill that, he writes. The book will kill the building. It is a meditation on the passing of one form of human expression and the rise of another. And it is, ironically, a book arguing for the preservation of buildings. And slowly, the attitude toward medieval architecture begins to change. People who had dismissed Notre-Dame as a Gothic relic begin to see it differently. They begin to see beauty in the pointed arches and the flying buttresses and the carved portals. They begin to understand that something precious is being lost. Hugo has not merely written a novel, he has launched a preservation movement. It works, the public mood shifts. There is a growing awareness that France possesses something precious in its medieval buildings, something that carelessness and neglect are destroying. A commission on historical monuments is established. Surveys are conducted. The worst abuses are halted. And in 1844, the government announces a competition for the restoration of Notre-Dame. The winner, the man who will spend the next 20 years bringing the cathedral back to life, is a young architect named Eugene Emmanuel Viollet-le-Duc. Viollet-le-Duc is one of the most controversial figures in the history of architecture. He is brilliant, meticulous, profoundly knowledgeable about medieval building techniques. He has studied Gothic architecture more deeply than almost anyone alive. He understands the structural logic of the flying buttress and the ribbed vault with an engineer's precision and a scholar's depth. And he does not merely restore, he reimagines. The restoration of Notre-Dame, which runs from 1844 to 1864, is a massive undertaking. The entire building is scaffolded, the stonework is repaired, the damaged sculptures are replaced, the roof is re-leaded, the stained glass that remains is cleaned and conserved. The stained glass that was lost is replaced with new glass designed in the medieval style. But Viollet-le-Duc goes further. He adds elements that were never part of the original building. The spire, the famous 93-meter spire that would become one of the most recognizable elements of the Paris skyline, is his invention. The original medieval spire had been removed in the 18th century because it was decaying. Viollet-le-Duc designs a new one, taller and more elaborate than the original, and erects it over the crossing. He models one of the copper apostle statues at its base on himself, facing away from the spire, looking back at his own work with a characteristic expression of satisfaction. He adds the gargoyles, the famous gargoyles of Notre-Dame, those brooding stone creatures that perch on the balustrades of the towers and gaze down at the city with expressions of profound contempt, are not medieval, they are Viollet-le-Duc. The medieval cathedral had gargoyles, but they were simple water spouts. The elaborate chimeras and striges that have become the most photographed elements of Notre-Dame are 19th century inventions. Viollet-le-Duc designed them. His sculptors carved them. They are brilliant, they are iconic, and they are fake. This is the paradox of Viollet-le-Duc. He saved Notre-Dame. Without his restoration, the building might genuinely have collapsed. The stonework was crumbling. The structure was compromised. Another few decades of neglect might have been fatal, but in saving it, he changed it. The Notre-Dame that we know, the Notre-Dame of postcards and paintings and tourist photographs, is not purely medieval. It is a collaboration between the 12th century and the 19th. Between the anonymous master builders of the Gothic age and one very particular, very brilliant, very opinionated architect of the modern age. Whether this is a triumph of preservation or an act of creative vandalism depends on whom you ask. The debate continues. It will probably never be resolved, and in a way, the debate itself has become part of the cathedral's story. Notre-Dame has always been a building that people argue about, a building that provokes passion, a building that refuses to be simple. What is beyond debate is that Viollet-le-Duc saved the physical structure. The building was genuinely in danger of collapse. He repaired the foundations. He replaced the crumbling stone. He rebuilt the flying buttresses. He made the building structurally sound for the first time in centuries, and he did it with an understanding of Gothic engineering that was, and remains, unmatched. He understood the forces. He understood the materials. He understood the logic of the pointed arch and the ribbed vault with a clarity that allowed him to repair them without altering the essential mechanics. The building that survived the fire of 2019, the building whose walls and vaults and buttresses held while the roof burned above them, held because Viollet-le-Duc made them hold. The bells of Notre-Dame deserve a moment of our attention. The cathedral has 10 bells. The largest and most famous is the great bourdon called Emmanuel. He hangs in the south tower. He weighs 13 tons. His clapper alone weighs nearly 500 kilograms. When he rings, the sound is a deep bass note that vibrates through the stones of the tower and across the rooftops of the Isle de la Cite and out over the river. You can feel it in your chest from 100 meters away. Emmanuel was cast in 1681, recast from the metal of an older bell. He has rung for every major event in French history since then: the death of kings, the end of wars, the liberation of Paris in 1944, the death of Pope John Paul II, the fire of 2019. His voice is the voice of Notre-Dame, deep, resonant, unmistakable, Parisians who live within earshot, and the sound carries far on a quiet night. Know his voice the way they know the voice of an old friend. The other 9 bells are smaller. They hang in the North Tower. They were recast in 2013 to replace a set of inferior bells that had been installed after the Revolution. The new bells were cast in a foundry in Normandy using traditional methods. The molten bronze poured into clay molds and left to cool slowly over days. Each bell is tuned to a specific note. Together, when they ring in harmony, they produce a sound that the medieval builders would have recognized. A carillon of bronze voices calling across the rooftops of Paris, the way they have called for 860 years. During the fire of 2019, there was a moment of genuine fear that the heat would reach the bells. If the temperature in the towers had risen high enough, the bells could have cracked or melted, destroying instruments that are irreplaceable. The towers held. The bells survived. Emmanuel still rings. There is one more element of Notre-Dame that deserves attention before we move into the modern age. The roof. The roof of Notre-Dame, the structure that the fire of 2019 would destroy, is a marvel of medieval engineering. It is built of oak, entire trees, some of them a meter in diameter, shaped and fitted together in a vast framework that spans the full width and length of the nave. The French call this structure la forêt, the forest, because it contains so many trees. An estimated 1,300 oaks went into the original roof. Each tree was felled individually in the forests of the Île-de-France, transporting to the building site, shaped by carpenters using axes and adzes and hand saws, and raised into position with rope and windlass. The roof structure is invisible from inside the cathedral. It sits above the stone vaults, separated from the interior by a gap of several meters. If you could see it, and before the fire very few people ever did, you would find yourself in a vast dark space like the hull of an inverted ship. The timbers arch overhead. The air smells of ancient wood and dust and centuries. Cobwebs hang in sheets from the rafters. The only light comes from small openings in the eaves where pigeons nest and sparrows flit. Above the oak framework, a covering of lead sheets protects the wood from rain. The lead is heavy, over 200 tons of it. It gives Notre-Dame its distinctive grey silhouette, that grey that blends so perfectly with the grey of the Paris sky that sometimes, on an overcast day, the roof seems to dissolve into the clouds above. This is the structure that will burn in 2019. 800 years of oak, 200 tons of lead, a forest hidden above a forest of stone. The 20th century is kinder to Notre-Dame, but not without its dramas. During the two world wars, the cathedral is threatened but survives. In 1944, as the Allied forces approach Paris, Hitler orders the city destroyed. His military commander in Paris, General Dietrich von Choltitz, receives the order. Mines are placed beneath the bridges of the Seine. Explosives are positioned in key buildings. Notre-Dame is among the targets. Von Choltitz does not carry out the order. The reasons are debated by historians to this day. Perhaps he recognizes that the war is lost and that destroying Paris will not change the outcome. Perhaps he is moved by the beauty of the city, a city that even an occupying general might hesitate to destroy. Perhaps he simply lacks the explosives and the manpower needed for such widespread destruction. Perhaps it is some combination of all three. Whatever the reason, he disobeys. He surrenders the city to the approaching Allied forces. Paris is liberated intact, and on the 26th of August, 1944, a great service of thanksgiving is held in Notre-Dame. General de Gaulle walks down the nave in triumph. Snipers are reportedly still firing from the rooftops outside. Some shots may be coming from within the cathedral itself, from the galleries above. The congregation drops to the floor. De Gaulle does not flinch. He continues walking. The service continues. The organ plays above the sound of gunfire. Notre-Dame, which has survived another war, celebrates another deliverance. In the decades that follow, the cathedral becomes a site of national mourning. State funerals are held here for the greatest figures of the French Republic. Charles de Gaulle himself in 1970, François Mitterrand in 1996. Each time, the nave fills with dignitaries and citizens, and the organ plays, and the building performs its oldest and most solemn function, the marking of a passing, the acknowledgement that something important has ended, and the quiet assertion, through the very presence of the stone around them, that something endures. Through the rest of the 20th century, Notre Dame settles into a quieter role. It is still the Cathedral of Paris, Masses are still said. The great feasts are still celebrated. The organ still plays, but it is also, increasingly, a tourist attraction. Millions of visitors come every year. They file through the nave with their cameras and their guidebooks. They light candles in the side chapels. They queue for the towers. They photograph the gargoyles. The building shows its age. The stone is blackened by centuries of Parisian pollution, the soot from coal fires and diesel engines that has coated every surface in a layer of grey-black grime. The flying buttresses are stained. The sculptures are eroded. The lead roof is patched and repatched. Notre-Dame needs maintenance constantly, and maintenance is expensive, and the French state, which has owned the building since the Revolution, does not always provide the funds. A major cleaning and restoration campaign begins in the 1990s. The western facade is cleaned for the first time in living memory. The transformation is startling. Beneath the layers of grime, the original pale limestone emerges. The facade, which had been uniformly dark grey for as long as anyone can remember, reveals itself to be a patchwork of cream and gold and soft pink. The cleaned stone gleams in the Parisian light. People who have walked past Notre-Dame every day of their lives are shocked. They had no idea the stone was this color. They had grown so accustomed to the grime that they thought it was the building's natural complexion. The cleaning takes years and is never quite finished. Like the fourth bridge, Notre-Dame's maintenance is a task without end. By the time you finish one section, another section needs attention. The building is always partially scaffolded, always partially wrapped in protective sheeting, always in the process of being saved from the slow, patient assault of time and weather and pollution. And then, the 15th of April, 2019. It is a Monday evening, spring in Paris. The sun is low. The tourists have mostly gone for the day. A few people linger on the bridges over the Seine, photographing the cathedral in the golden light. At approximately 6:18 in the evening, a fire alarm sounds inside the cathedral. It is investigated. Nothing is found. At 6:43, a second alarm sounds. This time, smoke is visible in the attic above the nave. The attic of Notre-Dame is known as the Forest, La Forte. It is called this because it is built from an ancient forest of oak timbers, some of them dating from the 12th century. Entire trees, each one unique, support the lead-covered roof above the stone vaults. The timbers are dry, 800 years dry. They are coated in centuries of dust and resin. They are, in the most literal sense, a tinderbox. The fire starts in the forest, and it spreads fast. By 7 o'clock, flames are visible from outside the cathedral. By 7:50, the spire of Viollet-le-Duc is burning. The laid cladding melts and pours down the sides of the spire in silver streams. The oak structure beneath glows orange against the darkening sky. The spire begins to lean. At 7:50, the spire falls. It seems to happen slowly. The lead-clad structure leans, pauses, and then folds in on itself. It collapses downward through the vaulted ceiling of the crossing, crashing into the interior of the cathedral in a shower of burning timber and molten lead. The sound is heard across the island, a deep resonant boom, followed by the rumble of falling stone. A cloud of dust and ash rises through the hole in the roof and billows upward into the night sky. The image is broadcast live around the world. Millions of people around the world watch a building they love, a building many of them have never visited but that they recognize as part of their shared heritage, burning against the Paris sky. In Paris itself, crowds gather on the bridges and the quays. They stand in stunned silence. Some sing hymns, some pray, Some simply stare at the flames with expressions that contain something beyond grief, something closer to disbelief. This cannot be happening. Not to this building, not to Notre-Dame. The heat is extraordinary. Lead melts at 327 degrees Celsius. The oak timbers in the attic burn at temperatures well above 1,000 degrees. The molten lead runs down the sides of the building in silver streams and pools on the pavement below. The heat can be felt from 100 meters away. The smoke, thick and acrid with the fumes of burning lead, drifts across the island and over the river. The air smells of destruction, of 800 years ending. The firefighters of Paris, the sapeurs-pompiers, are already on scene. They face an impossible choice. The fire is in the roof structure above the stone vaults. Water pumped from below may not reach it. Water dropped from above, from helicopters, could collapse the already weakened stone vaults under its weight. The decision is made to fight from within. Firefighters enter the burning cathedral. They climb through the smoke and the heat to positions inside the towers and along the upper galleries. They pour water onto the flames. They save what they can. And what they save is remarkable. The two towers, the 3 rose windows, the stone vaults of the nave, which hold, despite the fire raging above them and the collapse of the spire through the crossing, most of the vaults survive. The stone holds 800 years of medieval engineering, tested by the worst fire in the cathedral's history, and the stone holds. The crown of thorns is rescued. A human chain of firefighters and clergy passes the relic case through the smoke and out of the burning cathedral. Other relics are saved. The great organ, with its 8,000 pipes, is damaged by water and heat, but not destroyed. By morning, the fire is out. The roof is gone. The spire is gone. The crossing vault has partially collapsed. Rubble and ash cover the floor of the nave, but the walls stand, the towers stand, the windows, those 800-year-old windows, stand. Notre-Dame has burned, but Notre-Dame has not fallen. The morning reveals the damage. The roof is gone. Where the lead-covered oak had been for 800 years, there is now open sky. The crossing vault has partially collapsed, leaving a ragged hole through which you can see the clouds above. Rubble covers the floor of the transept, chunks of stone and twisted metal and charred timber. A layer of grey ash, lead dust and wood ash and centuries of accumulated grime released by the heat covers everything. But the walls stand. The great piers that have supported the nave since the 12th century have not moved. The flying buttresses arch outward from the walls exactly as they did before the fire. The western facade is untouched. The towers are sound, and the rose windows, those extraordinary 800-year-old wheels of glass and lead and color, are intact. Not a panel lost. Not a lead came melted. The firefighters who directed their hoses at the walls around the windows, cooling the stone to prevent the heat from destroying the glass, saved something irreplaceable. In the days that follow, structural engineers enter the building cautiously. They measure, they probe, they test the strength of the surviving vaults with sensors and instruments, and they confirm what the medieval builders always knew. The stone holds, the engineering works, the Gothic structural system, pointed arches and ribbed vaults and flying buttresses working together, has survived the worst test it has ever faced, 800 years after it was designed. It has done exactly what it was designed to do. It has stood. The reaction is immediate and global. People weep in the streets of Paris. They gather on the bridges and the quays of the Seine, and they watch the smoke rise from the ruins, and they weep. Not just the old, not just the devout. Young people, tourists, students, People who had never set foot inside the cathedral weep for it. Something in the burning of Notre-Dame touches a nerve that runs deeper than religion or nationality or architectural taste. It is the nerve of loss, the knowledge that certain things, once destroyed, can never truly be replaced, that the world contains irreplaceable things, and that this was one of them. Within hours, pledges of money begin to arrive, hundreds of millions of euros. The richest families in France pledge vast sums. Ordinary people contribute what they can. Foreign governments offer assistance. The response is extraordinary. Within days, nearly €1 billion has been pledged for the restoration. And the debate begins. What should be rebuilt? How faithful should the restoration be? Should Viollet-le-Duc's spire be recreated exactly? Or should a new design, a contemporary design, take its place? Should the cathedral be restored to its pre-fire condition? Or should this be an opportunity to reimagine it? An international competition is discussed. Architects from around the world propose designs. Some are respectful, some are provocative, some are deeply peculiar. A glass roof, a garden, a swimming pool. The suggestions reveal how deeply people care about this building and how little they agree about what it should be. In the end, the decision is made to restore the cathedral as it was. Viollet-le-Duc's spire will be recreated. The oak forest of the roof will be rebuilt using traditional techniques, with oak timbers from forests across France. The lead cladding will be replaced. The damaged stone will be repaired or replaced with stone from the same quarries that supplied the original builders. It is a decision rooted in continuity, in the belief that what Notre-Dame was is what Notre-Dame should be, that 860 years of history should not be interrupted by a single night of fire, that the silhouette of the spire against the Paris sky is not just an architectural detail, but a part of the city's identity, and that changing it would be a loss no less real than the fire itself. President Macron sets an ambitious timeline: 5 years. The cathedral will reopen in 5 years. Many experts think this is impossible. The damage is extensive. The structural assessment alone will take months. The sourcing of materials, the oak timbers, the laid, the limestone, will take years. The craftsmanship required is of the highest order, and there are only a limited number of people in the world who can do it. And yet, the work begins almost immediately. Within weeks of the fire, temporary structures are erected to protect the damaged interior from rain. The rubble is cleared painstakingly, every stone fragment catalogued and stored in case it can be reused. Engineers install sensors throughout the building to monitor the structural integrity of the remaining walls and vaults. Scaffolding is erected around the most damaged areas. And across France, an extraordinary thing happens. Forests volunteer their trees. The French Forestry Service identifies suitable oaks in forests across the country, trees that are straight and tall and old enough to provide the massive timbers needed for the roof. Each tree is individually selected. Each one is felled with care. Some of the oaks are 200 years old, planted in the time of Napoleon. They have stood through 2 centuries of French history. And now they will become part of Notre-Dame. It is a continuation of a tradition that stretches back to the 12th century, when the original builders felled their oaks in the same forests of the Isle de France. The restoration is underway now. If you visit Paris today, you will see the scaffolding, the cranes, the protective sheeting that wraps parts of the cathedral like bandages on a wounded body. The work is painstaking, slow, meticulous. Stoneworkers study the original carved elements, many of which have been removed and stored for conservation. They measure every detail, they photograph every surface, and then they carve new stones to match, using the same limestone from the Ile-de-France quarries that the medieval builders used. The stone is the same color, the same texture, the same grain. When it is placed in the wall, it will be almost indistinguishable from the original. Almost. The new stone is slightly lighter, slightly cleaner. Give it 50 years of Paris rain and pollution, and it will match perfectly. Time is the finishing tool. New oak timbers are being shaped for the roof. They come from forests that were planted centuries ago, some of them specifically to provide timber for building projects. The trees are straight and tall and dense-grained, grown slowly in the competition for light that produces the strong, tight-grained wood that builders prize. Each one is measured and shaped by hand, the bark stripped, the heartwood squared with adzes and saws, fitted to its neighbors the way the medieval carpenters fitted theirs. The joints are mortise and tenon, cut with precision and held with oak pegs rather than metal nails. The techniques are ancient, the tools are modern, but the hands that wield them have been trained in the same traditions. The intention is the same, to build something that will stand for centuries. Lead workers are another world entirely. They work with sheets of lead that are cast on sand beds, poured as molten metal, and allowed to cool into flat panels that are then cut and shaped and fitted to the oak framework beneath. Lead is soft. It can be bent and folded and dressed with simple tools, but it is also heavy and toxic. The workers wear protective equipment that the medieval plumbers never had: respirators, gloves, monitoring devices that track their exposure to lead dust. The craft is ancient. The safety protocols are modern. Between them, they produce a roof that is indistinguishable in form from the original. The stained glass conservators work in a studio near the cathedral. The windows that survived the fire have been removed, panel by panel, and brought here for cleaning and repair. Each panel is a mosaic of small pieces of colored glass held together by strips of lead called cames. Over the centuries, the lead has oxidized and weakened. The glass has accumulated layers of grime both inside and out. The conservators disassemble each panel, clean every piece of glass individually, replace the lead cames, and reassemble the panel with the same care that the original glaziers used 800 years ago. They work with magnifying glasses and tiny brushes and a patience that borders on reverence. They are handling some of the oldest colored glass in France. They do not take the responsibility lightly. And in December 2024, the cathedral reopened, not fully complete. The work continues above and around the restored nave, but open, alive, receiving the people of Paris once more. The reopening on the 7th of December 2024 is a national event. The ceremony is broadcast live. The president speaks. The archbishop speaks. The great organ plays for the first time since the fire, its voice filling the restored nave with a sound that many people feared they would never hear again. The acoustics are different. The stone is cleaner. The air moves differently through a space that has been subtly altered by the restoration. But the essential quality, that deep resonant embrace of sound that only a Gothic cathedral can produce, is unchanged. The building still knows how to hold a note, how to make a single voice fill a space the size of a football pitch, how to transform sound into something that feels sacred. But it is the ordinary Parisians who matter most, the ones who file through the doors with quiet wonder on their faces, who look up at the restored vaults and the cleaned stone and the light pouring through the windows that survived the fire, who stand in the nave and remember what it felt like to think this was lost. It is late now, the visitors have gone. The restoration crews have packed up for the night. The cathedral stands on its island in the river, the way it has stood for 860 years. The Seine flows past in the darkness. It makes no sound that you can hear from the Parvis, but you know it is there. You can smell it, faintly, a mineral dampness that drifts up from the water. The river was here before the cathedral. It will be here after, but for now, they exist together. The grey water and the grey stone, flowing and standing, moving and still. The floodlights illuminate the western facade. The two towers glow against the night sky. The Gallery of Kings stands in its row, those 19th century replacements for the revolutionary victims, watching the city with blank stone eyes. The portals are deep in shadow. The carved figures of the Last Judgment are invisible in the darkness. The damned and the saved alike are sleeping. Walk around to the south side. From the Pont au Double, you can see the full length of the cathedral. The flying buttresses arch outward from the upper walls, their stone arms glowing in the floodlight. The windows of the chapels are dark. The apse curves gently at the eastern end, its windows catching a faint reflected light from the river below. And above the crossing, the restored spire rises into the darkness. Viollet-le-Duc's spire, rebuilt, returned to the skyline that lost it on an April evening. The copper apostles stand at its base once more, facing outward, including the one that looks back at his own work with that expression of quiet satisfaction. The rooster at the summit contains its relics once again. It turns slowly in the night breeze, pointing now east, now west, keeping watch over the city. The Seine reflects the floodlights in broken ripples. A bateau mouche, one of the tourist boats that ply the river, passes beneath the Pont de l'Archevêque. Its windows glow with warm light. Music drifts faintly across the water. The passengers look up at the cathedral as they pass, and from the Parvis, you can see their faces turned upward, lit by the floodlights reflected off the stone. They are seeing Notre-Dame from the water, the way the river has always seen it, from below looking up. The stone rising from the island like a natural formation, a cliff of carved limestone growing from the bedrock of the Isle de la Cite. The gargoyles are quiet tonight, those stone creatures on the tower balustrades, the chimeras and the striges that Viollet-le-Duc imagined into existence nearly 2 centuries ago. They sit with their chins on their fists and stare out over Paris. They have been staring for a long time. They have seen the city transform below them. Horse carriages becoming motor cars, becoming electric buses. Gas lamps becoming electric lights, becoming the glow of 10 million screens. The city changes. The gargoyles do not. They watch, they wait, they keep their own counsel. From the top of the towers, if you could climb them tonight, you would see all of Paris spread below you, the lights of the boulevards tracing the city's geometry in gold, the dark ribbon of the Seine winding through the center, the distant glow of the Sacré-Cœur on the hill of Montmartre, the Eiffel Tower blinking its hourly light show, and below you, the roof of the cathedral, restored, re-leaded, the oak forest hidden beneath its grey surface, new timbers in an ancient pattern, holding the same weight that the old timbers held for 8 centuries. There is a bookshop on the left bank, just across from Notre-Dame, the Bouquinistes. They have been here for centuries, selling second-hand books and prints from green wooden boxes that fold open along the stone parapet of the quay. In the morning, they unfold their boxes and display their wares, old maps of Paris, faded prints of Notre-Dame in various centuries, second-hand novels with yellowed pages. The Bouquinistes are part of the landscape of Notre-Dame just as surely as the flying buttresses. They are the human equivalent of the gargoyles, permanent fixtures who watch the building and the river and the passing crowds with the same impassive patience. If you buy a print of Notre-Dame from a balconiste on a warm evening and take it to a bench by the river, you can hold it up and compare the image with the building behind it. The print might show the cathedral in the 18th century, before Viollet-le-Duc, without the spire, the roofline lower and simpler, or it might show the cathedral during the Revolution, the gallery of kings empty, the portals stripped of their statues, or during the fire. The spire falling against a sky of smoke and flame. The building is the same, the building is different. It has been all of these things, it has worn all of these faces, and it has survived them all. Notre-Dame has been many things. It has been a church, a coronation hall, a revolutionary temple, a warehouse, a wine store, a symbol of faith, a symbol of France, a novel by Victor Hugo, a Disney film, a tourist attraction, a construction site, and now a resurrection. Through all of it, through the coronations and the revolutions and the neglect and the restoration and the fire and the rebuilding, the building has endured, not because stone is permanent. Stone is not permanent. Stone cracks, stone weathers, stone burns. The building has endured because people chose to keep it. Generation after generation, they chose to repair what was broken, to replace what was lost, to rebuild what had fallen. This is what a great building is, not stone, not glass, not timber or laid or mortar. A great building is a decision made over and over again by people who were not born when it was built and who will not live to see it finished, to keep it standing, to keep it alive, to pass it on. Notre-Dame is that decision, made by Maurice de Sully in 1163, made by the stonemasons of the 13th century, made by whoever buried the heads of the kings of Judah during the Revolution, made by Victor Hugo with his novel, made by Viollet-le-Duc with his restoration, made by the firefighters who entered the burning cathedral in 2019, made by the craftspeople who are rebuilding it now. The same decision, made 1,000 times, over 860 years. Keep it standing, keep it alive, pass it on. There is a bronze star set into the pavement of the Parvis. It marks point 0, the point from which all distances in France are measured. Every road sign in the country that says Paris 300 km or Paris 50 km, every distance that is measured to the capital is measured to this point, this small bronze disc in the pavement in front of Notre-Dame. It is a coincidence of geography and history. The cathedral happens to stand at the center of the country's oldest city, on the island where Paris was born, but the symbolism is hard to miss. All roads lead here. All distances are measured from this spot. Notre-Dame is not merely at the center of Paris, it is at the center of France, the fixed point around which the entire country orients itself. Visitors find the bronze star and stand on it. They spread their arms, they take photographs, they make wishes. The star is worn smooth by the touching of millions of hands and the stepping of millions of feet. It is the most visited spot in Paris that is not actually inside a building, and it is here, at point 0, in the shadow of Notre-Dame, that you understand something about this cathedral that no amount of architectural history can teach you. You understand that it is loved, not admired. Not appreciated, loved, the way you love a person, irrationally, deeply, without needing to justify it. That is why the world wept when it burned. That is why the money poured in. That is why the craftspeople are rebuilding it with a care that borders on devotion. Because you do not let something you love disappear. You fix it, you tend it, you pass it on. The night deepens, the floodlights dim, the Seine flows dark and silent around the island. The city quiets. The last metro trains rumble beneath the streets and fall still. Notre-Dame stands in the darkness. Its towers rise above the rooftops of the Isle de la Cite. Its flying buttresses arch into the night like the ribs of some vast sleeping creature. The stone is cool. The windows are dark. Inside, the nave is empty. The chairs are aligned in rows. The candles in the side chapels have been extinguished. The great organ is silent. Its 8,000 pipes hold their breath. Somewhere in the walls, in the joints between the stones, in the mortar that has been renewed and renewed again over 8 centuries, the cathedral makes its small night sounds, the faint ticking of stone contracting in the cool air, the almost imperceptible settling of ancient foundations, the whisper of air moving through a gap in a window that has been there since the 13th century. The building breathes, the way all great stone buildings breathe, slowly, imperceptibly, a rhythm measured not in seconds but in centuries. There is one last thing to notice. If you stand on the parvis in the deepest part of the night, when the floodlights have finally dimmed and the last tourists have gone and the river is black and silent, you can see the stars, not many. Paris is bright. The light pollution washes away all but the strongest stars, but a few are visible, directly above the towers, small points of white light in the darkness. The medieval builders saw these same stars. They looked up from their scaffolding at the end of a long day of carving stone and laying mortar, and they saw the same constellations that you see now, Orion in winter, the Great Bear circling the pole, the faint band of the Milky Way on the clearest nights. The stars have not changed. The building has not fundamentally changed. Between them, the centuries are thin. 860 years is a long time for a human life. For a stone building and a field of stars, it is barely a breath. Sleep now, let the image settle behind your eyes. A cathedral on an island, grey stone and grey water, 2 towers reaching into the darkness, a spire restored, rose windows holding their blue and their red and their gold in the silence, waiting for the morning sun to release them. The Seine flows past. It has been flowing past since before the cathedral was built. It will flow past long after, but tonight, the water and the stone exist together, in the same darkness, in the same silence, in the same patient, enduring presence that is the truest thing about both of them. 860 years. Stone and water and light and time. Good night. Thank you for listening and sweet dreams. If you enjoyed this, there are more stories waiting for you.